round of voting for House Speaker. This comes after Congressman Jim Jordan announced he's not dropping out of the race, saying the House has important work to do, including helping to fund Israel and to fund the American government. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me now from Capitol Hill with more. Jay, we saw you were just talking with former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. What did he have to say about all this?
Yeah, he was asked, is this wearing thin on members? Because we've heard from Republicans who say that they've gone round after round after round here. There's already one Republican who's on a congressional trip to Israel right now. It's unclear if they vote through the weekend, which Jim Jordan intimated they might, if Republicans would stick around for that, particularly if some Jordan allies would stick around for that. Speaker McCarthy said it's wearing thin on him too, but he believes that Jim Jordan can stay in the fight. That's me paraphrasing a little bit of his answer there. But the reality here is, Diane, Jim Jordan met with his holdout votes last night, and everyone emerged from that meeting, as you and I have been talking about all morning, each of those holdouts, and no one said that they were moved by what Jim Jordan said. So right now, there were at least 22 Republicans who didn't vote for Jim Jordan the last time the Republicans voted, or the last time the House rather voted on a speaker. Now we're on track to hold another vote any moment this morning, and if those 22 hold together, if their ranks even grow, it's a bad sign for Jim Jordan picking up any votes in this process.
And our senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott actually asked Jordan why he's staying in the race. Let's listen to that moment. Looks like we don't have that ready. We'll try to get it up. But Jay, what is the sentiment there on Capitol Hill about how long this could go and what the patience level is for it all?
Yeah, and that's the thing, Diane, is nobody really knows how long this could go. To a degree, it's up to Jim Jordan, because we've heard from Republicans who say they're in it with Jordan for the long haul. They're open to some alternatives, but they're going to back him until he decides to leave. And I've also heard from staffers who would love their bosses to be in consideration to be the next Speaker of the House, but each says their boss is not going to cross Jim Jordan. They're not going to come to the floor, put their name in consideration on any of these ballots until it's clear that this is something that Jim Jordan no longer wants. So the ball is really in Jim Jordan's court here. And when he had that press conference this morning, he was asked how long he could stay in this for, if there were going to be votes this weekend, and he indicated he wasn't dropping out anytime soon. And the reality is, I've talked to Republicans who are bracing not just to vote today, not just to vote through the weekend, but to have vote after vote after vote in a potential attempt from Jordan and his allies to break down some of that opposition. But that opposition says they're not going to be moved. They're holding firm. They have deep disagreements about a Jim Jordan speakership.
They sure do, and it seems like Democrats are trying to maybe take advantage of that. We heard the Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, just a little while ago, renewing calls for a bipartisan path forward. And this time he seemed to be more specific, saying, you know, Democrats could support Patrick McHenry for Speaker and a few other what he called reasonable Republicans. What do you make of that? Is that a viable option?
Yeah, and the question becomes exactly what does he want to support? Does he want to support a temporary power for Patrick McHenry to act as Speaker of the House while Jim Jordan campaigns? I've heard from some Democrats who say that's a non-starter. They don't want to support a temporary speakership for Patrick McHenry if it means Jim Jordan stays in the running because become the Speaker, because Democrats have a deep, deep, deep antipathy to a Jim Jordan speakership. They call him an insurrectionist and things of that nature, as you heard Hakeem Jeffries say. And also you heard Hakeem Jeffries keep the door open to the possibility of partnering with moderate Republicans on a permanent speaker. I even asked Hakeem Jeffries if he had had conversations with moderate Republicans about getting together on a speaker candidate, and he said he'd have to ask them. So he left the door open for the possibility that he has had those ongoing conversations. The thing is, we've heard from a number of Republicans who say it's a non-starter for them working with Democrats, but the reality is every vote that fails and we schedule another vote for Jim Jordan, we've heard from Republicans who say they are getting broken down. They're looking for an off-ramp. They thought their off-ramp might come yesterday when you would have empowered Patrick McHenry temporarily, but that obviously failed because it didn't get enough Republican support. So the question facing Jim Jordan, frankly facing Democrats as well, and facing moderate Republicans in the House is, what is the off-ramp to get the House back on track? And the reality is we're nowhere closer to that off-ramp than we were at the beginning of this week.
Yeah, Jeffries was even asked if Democrats might even put forward the name of a Republican for Speaker during the vote. It was interesting to hear he didn't say no. He said, you know, something along the lines of that's something that we would have to discuss. Probably something we would have thought impossible just a week or two ago, Jay, but the way this is going, it feels like we can't count anything out. Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill for us. Jay, thank you. Gaza, where civilians are waiting for much-needed humanitarian aid to cross the border from Egypt. More than 100 trucks are ready to enter Gaza, but the Rafah border crossing remains closed. A UN spokesperson says advanced negotiations are underway to make sure the aid will be...
Have all members recorded their presence? On this roll call, 427 members have recorded their presence. The question now recurs on the election of a speaker. If the tellers will please come forward. House will come to order. Nominations are now in order. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to nominate Jim Jordan for the Speaker of the House. Now, I've listened to the speeches this week, and I can already tell you what my friends on the other side will say using their poll-tested phrases. But let me correct the record. Jim Jordan is an effective legislator. To legislate is about more than the name on the bill. It's about reaching compromise and working long hours behind the scenes to get the job done.
The House will come to order. Gentleman may resume.
When you are the chairman of a committee, you are responsible for dozens of bills passing the House and being signed into law. So let me tell you a few facts that don't come out in the polls. As the leader of the Judiciary Committee, Jim has passed more bills through the House in just 3 years than the entire Democrat leadership team that has their collective 28 years in Congress. Mr. Aguilar has a whopping one whole bill signed into law, a post office in San Bernardino. I guess that's good enough to be caucus chair. Jim Jordan, on the other hand, has a hand in drafting bills like the REINS Act to curb unaccountable bureaucrats. He helped negotiate and pass H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill this House has ever passed. And many of you know, because you were in the room, watching Jim find compromise, watching Jim listen to your positions, and finding a bill that can pass. And let's put this in reality. We've had large majorities, but we never could pass a border security bill. That takes leadership. Now, they're going to get upset by it. Why? Because every single Democrat voted against securing our border. Democrats are attacking Jim because they don't want the American people to remember that they voted against securing and keeping a wide open border. They may not want the American public to know the number of people we catch on the terrorist watch list. They may not want people to know what the future holds in the security for our nation based upon their policies. Name me one bill Democrats passed that would secure our border. I'm waiting. You can't, because they haven't. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, if we measure lawmakers by how many bills have their name on it, we are using the wrong measuring stick. Some of my members I know with the most bills to their name are the most selfish. Jim Jordan, on the other hand, is one of the most selfless members I know. I've known Jim a long time, so I want to do something different. I actually called the freshman members on his committee and asked them, what do you think of your chairman? Here's just a few. I quote, Jim empowers every member of judiciary to pursue what interests them. I quote by another, he lets each of us take the lead on the issues that are important to us, even letting freshmen and junior members take important roles. Another one, he trusts our judgment on how we handle issues and witnesses, and always seeks our input on key issues. Another, as a freshman, he had me lead off a hearing that related to my subject matter expertise, and he goes out of his way to highlight members' successes. He is straightforward, honest, and reliable. That is who Jim Jordan is, and that's what being a speaker is all about. Now, some of you might not know this, but Jim and I have a long history. We created because we take our job serious. I first met Jim as a candidate. I traveled to Ohio. I remember pulling up for breakfast at a Bob Evans in Ohio. There was Jim having a meeting, listening to constituents. I traveled with him throughout the day, from Rotary to Farm Bureau, to just listening to people that had concerns. And I watched them, the same Jim Jordan I see today. He was a leader, a listener, and a fighter. We were actually elected to Congress that same year and became close friends. It was a small class. There was only 13 of us. It was one of the smallest Republican classes in modern history. Over time, we took different routes. Jim actually ran against me for leader in 2018. It was a hard-fought battle. But I never once questioned his skills or commitment to this conference or this country. After the race, I became leader, and we had an opening for the ranking member on House Oversight. Jim didn't even apply for the job. I walked into steering, didn't tell steering. I walked into the other room, and I picked up the phone, and I called Jim. I said, I know you're not running for the job, but I believe in what Jim Collins says in the book, Good to Great. You put the right people in the right seats on the bus. And Jim, you and I may have challenged one another, but you were the right person for that seat. And it was right when he took that job. It was right again when I asked Jim to step up and join the Intel Committee when Democrats put politics over people and turned the Intel Committee into an impeachment committee. It was right again when we asked Jim to step up and be the right person to lead Judiciary Committee as chairman. And Jim is the right person to take that seat behind me to be our next Speaker of the House. Mr. Speaker, we have an important job to do. The American people expect us to focus on the most pressing issues. We've watched what the Democrat majority has done and brought us inflation like we haven't seen since the 70s. We've watched what the Democrats have done by opening up our border, bringing fentanyl, killing Americans each and every day. And now we have a war in Israel. This country is too great for small visions. Trust me, being Speaker is not an easy job, especially in this conference. But I've seen Jim spend his entire career fighting for freedom, no matter what, no matter the odds, and I know he is ready for the job. And so it is my honor to say, as a member of the Republican Conference, I am directed by the vote of that conference to present for the election to the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives the name of my friend, the Honorable Jim Jordan, a representative from the state of Ohio. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 212, it's a New York area code, and it's our call for a speaker of integrity, intelligence, and inclusion. 212 is our call for a speaker who will protect our children, our veterans, our planet. 212 is our call for a speaker who will grow the middle class, lower costs, create good-paying jobs, and make health care affordable. 212 is our call for a speaker who will secure liberty, justice, and opportunity for everyone. Well, the unanimous call
Not gonna listen to this?
of 212 House Democrats.
We are listening
has
to
been
nomination
answered.
speeches before
our
a
nominee
third
for
vote
Speaker,
for Speaker of the House. We just saw
gentleman
former House
from
Speaker Kevin
Brooklyn,
McCarthy
the leader
nominating
of our
formally
House
Jim
Democratic
Jordan,
caucus,
and now we're hearing from the
Honorable
Democrats, Catherine
Hakeem
Clark,
Jeffries.
nominating Hakeem Jeffries. Just there officially said his name. Jeffries, of course, has been the Democratic nominee throughout this process, but Democrats don't hold the majority. So the big focus is on the Republicans today and whether Jim Jordan can pull this vote through for a third time. Jay, I understand, I want to bring in Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill as well as our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott. Jay, I understand there are some members missing. So it looks like Jordan's going to need 214 votes this time around, meaning he can only afford to lose 5 Republican votes. Can he pull that off?
Yeah, and because of the math, and remember, it is a number of lawmakers who are physically in the room, present, and voting. You have to have a majority of them, and because 4 Democrats are not here, plus 2 Republicans, it changed the math a little bit. Previously, if everybody was there and voting, Jordan could have only afforded to lose 4 votes. Now, to your point, he can only afford to lose 5. The 6th vote here is the spoiler, but the reality here is, Diane, there were 22 Republicans who voted against Jim Jordan the last time we did this 2 days ago on Wednesday, and it doesn't appear, having talked to those holdout votes yesterday, that Jim Jordan had made any kind of headway with them. It's one of the reasons why they tapped Kevin McCarthy to give that speech, to try to maybe give those holdout votes who might like Kevin McCarthy but not like Jim Jordan a little bit of a nudge. The question is, did it work?
Rach, I want to talk a little bit more about that significance, because sometimes just the person they choose to give the nomination speech sends a sort of signal. What do you read into McCarthy being that person today?
Well, Kevin McCarthy had the support of 96% of the conference when he was ousted. Yes, all Democrats did join with 8 Republicans moving to remove McCarthy from the Speaker's office, but he still had broad support. He was very popular. And so by having Kevin McCarthy get up there and nominate Congressman Jim Jordan today, it does send a message not only to the conference, but even to some of those members who have suggested that Kevin McCarthy should be Speaker again, that he is behind Congressman Jim Jordan. But at this point, it doesn't even seem clear if Jordan can ever get to the magic number of today, 214. I could tell you, I just talked to Congressman Troy Nehls outside on the steps as he was going in. He told me he doesn't believe Lord Jesus himself would be able to get the votes. As you can see, Democrats united there. You see them on their feet as Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, is now being nominated by Catherine Clark. And Troy Nehls also talked about that split screen, that Democrats are more unified at this point than the Republican Party, saying that if they end up losing the majority in the next election, that he's going to be thinking about the last 2 weeks and what has happened here on Capitol Hill, because he believes it's sending a wrong signal to the rest of the country. We do expect, and most Republicans, quite frankly, here do expect that there will be more opposition to Congressman Jim Jordan today. I talked to Congressman Molinaro also out on the steps. He voted for Jordan in the first 2 rounds. He told me he is not going to vote for him today. He believes the conference needs to get back in the room, come together, and try to figure out if there is anybody else that can get the votes.
Jay, one of the holdups for Jordan, one of the arguments being made against him is that he doesn't have the legislative accomplishments to be Speaker of the House. We heard Kevin McCarthy trying to rebut that today, talking about his work on border security, that he's seen Jim Jordan find compromise, and that just because his name isn't on a lot of bills doesn't mean that he lacks legislative experience. It means, in Kevin McCarthy's words, that he's selfless. How big is that a linchpin in all of this? And do you think McCarthy's words there can land on the votes that Jordan needs?
Well, that was exactly what Jim Jordan's detractors started to say really right after he threw his hat in the ring. There was this scuttlebutt going around from the anti-Jim Jordan crowd going, do you know that he's never passed a bill? And do you know that he's never co-sponsored a bill that is passed? McCarthy, to your point, said that anyone who was criticizing Jordan over that was, quote unquote, using the wrong measuring stick, and he called Jim Jordan selfless. But the reality is, Diane, that's not the only knock against Jim Jordan, as Rachel knows well, that these holdouts have had. Some have said that they don't like certain policy elements of Jim Jordan as it relates to tax cuts and things of that nature, but some have said they have much deeper disagreements with Jim Jordan. I've talked to members who say they just don't like Jim Jordan dating back years, and there's nothing he can do to turn them around short of, as one person described it to me, getting back in a time machine and undoing what was done. And then I've talked to, and Rachel has talked to too as well, Ken Buck, a Republican of Colorado, who has said that he doesn't like Jim Jordan's stance on the 2020 election, a stance that Jim Jordan somewhat refused to back away from even today in that press conference that Rachel was in when he was asked if he accepts the results of the 2020 election. Ken Buck said that's a huge deal breaker for him in supporting Jim Jordan.
And nothing from McCarthy on that today, but we did hear him try, it seemed like, Rachel, to push back on that. You know, we just don't like Jim Jordan. He's just not a nice guy, you know, as some people are saying. Talking about calling freshman members from the Judiciary Committee and asking them what they have to say about Jim Jordan, and painting this picture of this nice guy in a position of power who is treating those, you know, that are more junior to him with the utmost respect. What did you make of that?
Yeah, and a lot of this is to also send a message to the rest of the country, right? Because we're hearing Republican after Republican tell us why they're not supporting him. Obviously, Democrats are trying to frame a narrative around who Congressman Jim Jordan is. They're trying to paint him as someone who does not believe in the results of the 2020 election, has pushed false claims about it. They're trying to paint him as someone who supports the insurrection that happened here on Capitol Hill on January 6th. And so a lot of this is having Kevin McCarthy come forward and talk about the Jim Jordan he believes that he knows And we saw these very personalized speeches, even when McCarthy was trying to defend his speakership. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik talking about how he calls them when they have big moments in their lives, how they show up for his kids' birthdays or whatever it is, right? And so that's what that is about, taking that public opportunity there. But look, I mean, this is a conference that has met behind closed doors now for more hours than they've been actually legislating. They've had one-on-one meetings with Congressman Jim Jordan. There was another one just late last night where he tried to get all the holdouts in one room. Some members skipped that meeting. They said they wouldn't even show up. Others that were there, they left and they were just unmoved. They said they're just not going to back him. And so Congressman Jim Jordan, on the way here, I had an opportunity to ask him how long he's willing for this to go, how many rounds he's willing to go, if he's going to stay in this race, even if he's losing support. He reiterated that he has the majority of the support of the Republican conference, even though that's clearly not enough at this point. And he keeps mentioning that Kevin McCarthy went 15 rounds, and he believes that he'll eventually get there. But I can tell you, patience on this Friday especially is waning in the Republican Party. They don't believe at this point it's even productive to go multiple rounds today.
And it looks like they have started the voting now, and already one Republican in this call has voted for someone other than Republican Jim Jordan. That's the one you see in that other column. Rachel, you brought up that meeting, and Jay, you and I have already spoken about this. Some of those holdouts that Jordan met with not only said that he didn't change their mind, but that they didn't even go there because they're open to it, that the reason they attended that meeting was to try to convince him to drop out. So what happens if this vote fails again, Jay?
Well, first and foremost, I was like trying to talk to Rachel through the television camera, because when she said that this conference, this group of House Republicans have met for behind closed doors for longer than they voted, I was like, what a great point. That is exactly right. It is so true to the moment right now. And I hadn't thought of that, frankly, but it is exactly accurate. So Jim Jordan had this meeting last night where he tried to essentially turn some of these holdout votes from no's into yeses. And we heard from lawmakers who emerged from that meeting who said, A, Jim Jordan did nothing to sway their vote. We heard from some other lawmakers who said they never went there to hear out Jim Jordan. They went there to try to convince Jim Jordan to leave. So obviously that meeting was already, or leave the race, so that meeting was already off to a bad start, according to those lawmakers. We also heard from some members who were opposing Jim Jordan who never went to that meeting. I was talking to sources who were inside meetings with some of these Jordan holdout votes, some of the really prominent Jordan holdout votes, who said, no, they're not in that meeting with Jordan, they're here sitting with me. They skipped the meeting entirely. They didn't want to hear what Jim Jordan had to say, or they had other commitments, and Jim Jordan meeting with them did not rise to the top. So this whip operation, this means of trying to turn no votes into yeses, every single day it has not gone Jim Jordan's way. And it's why you heard Rachel mention earlier Republicans are bracing for more Jordan defections at this hour rather than less.
And for anyone just joining us, the House is in the process right now of holding its third vote for House Speaker. Right now, you can see Republican nominee Jim Jordan has 20 Republicans voting for him. But what you see, that 2 in that other column, means now we have a second Republican who has voted against him. Jordan can only afford to lose up to 5 Republicans in order to win this speakership. If he loses any more than that, based on the number of people at the original roll call, if he loses any more than 5 Republicans here, this vote fails again. He loses the speakership. Rachel, I want to talk about the political implications here, because even we heard Hakeem Jeffries address reporters earlier today, and even in the nominations today, Democrats seemed especially fiery, standing ovation during the nomination process. What is this all doing politically for Republicans? They have a razor-thin majority in the House right now. Could this cost them that majority in the next round of elections if this goes on too long?
Fear that this could cost them the majority in the next election is growing. You're hearing that from some vulnerable Republicans in very tough districts that President Biden won. They are worried about what message this is sending to their constituents, how they're going to be able to defend this. The dysfunction, quite frankly, will probably be played in campaign ads in the coming months as Democrats try and take back control of the House. So you have this playing out not only as we look ahead to 2024, but also when you talk about politically and what's going on right now. And where where we are in the climate, not only in the country, but also what's happening abroad. We are less than a month out until another possible government shutdown. You have the crisis that's also unfolding in Israel. We all watched President Biden address the nation just last night. He called on Congress to act. He's calling for more aid not only to Ukraine, but also to Israel as well, possibly including some more border funding in that too. Well, Congress can't do anything until there is a new Speaker of the House. And so at this point, Democrats are even raising the point they don't even know who to negotiate with anymore. Is it Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House? Is it the temporary Speaker of the House, Patrick McHenry? Or is it Jim Jordan, who's now nominated? And so at this point, you have a very dysfunctional Congress where they cannot move forward. And this is why they come here. They come here to work on behalf of the American people to actually get things done. So the longer this fight drags out, the more time they spend doing rounds like this, where it doesn't appear anyone is going to actually get the votes needed to become the next speaker, the less time they're doing working on the things that they frankly campaigned on. And that is the concern from a lot of Republicans who say they're going to be looking back right now at this moment, looking back exactly what we're watching happening right here on the House floor and say this is where they went wrong.
And I want to bring in our political director, Rick Klein, into the conversation as well, Rick, because to Rachel's point, we just heard from the president last night in the Oval Office talking about the desperate need for funding support for Israel and Ukraine, how America's national security and democracy in general is hanging in the balance. And yet also that juxtaposition against an American Congress that can't do anything until they elect a Speaker of the House. Is that urgency right now, do you think, helping or hurting Jim Jordan?
I think by all accounts it's actually hurting Jim Jordan. And the dynamics are a lot different than they were when Kevin McCarthy went through those 15 votes early in the year. I think everyone kind of thought McCarthy would get it eventually, even the holdouts. This is different. I don't think anyone, even Jordan, a lot of Jordan supporters, are under any pretension that he's actually going to get the votes. And in fact, they've gone backwards in some key ways in the last 24 hours. Among the votes that are so far tallied against him here right now was Vern Buchanan, who did vote for Jim Jordan the first ballot, but the second ballot went for Kevin McCarthy, and he has once again, I'm sorry, for Byron Donalds of Florida, but he has done so again this time. And I think the collapse of the backup plan from yesterday has also taken the party backwards, because at least with the idea of bringing more powers into the Speaker pro tem, you had a path forward. You had something that was viable, even if it wasn't the first option or the second option for Republicans. At least it would allow them to move things like Israel funding. It would allow them to get on with the functioning of the House. That idea was pulled from the table because so many Republicans objected to it. And I think to add to that, Jim Jordan's press conference this morning was kind of meandering and frankly didn't have a big takeaway and didn't project any kind of confidence that this was happening. So I think the sense now is they're voting because they don't really know what else to do. I also think it's going to be a hollow threat to these members to say they're going to keep them in all weekend, because there's an old saying that nothing moves Congress quite like the smell of jet fumes, and these guys want to get on planes and get home, and so do their staffs, and they want to get back to their families. And if there's truly no progress, and they've already got some attendance issues with today's vote, it's just hard for me to imagine that this is going to be, vote after vote after vote if there's no progress being shown toward getting a speaker.
Jay, the other conversation obviously being had up until late last night was this idea of giving the temporary speaker more power. Jordan himself, originally opposed to that, said that he would actually support it. Many thought strategically to buy him more time to get that support. That conversation, after 3 hours behind closed doors, was deemed dead in the water. But could we see that revived if this vote fails?
I mean, it crashed and burned yesterday because there weren't enough Republicans who supported that measure, particularly hardline conservative Republicans. Jim Jordan allies, by the way, a lot of them. So Jim Jordan wanted this plan to go into the works to give Patrick McHenry some extra powers. He would stay as the Speaker nominee, and however long Patrick McHenry had those extra powers for, a month, a few months, whatever, it would give Jim Jordan time to work on those 22 or so holdout votes, and eventually you'd have a Speaker vote that would, in theory, put Jim Jordan in the Speaker's chair. That was the plan Jim Jordan presented to House Republicans yesterday, and it really died on the vine because there weren't enough hardline Republicans, again, friends of Jim Jordan's, who liked that plan. A lot of them said that they questioned the constitutionality of it. So now, if that plan were to come about again, it would likely have to be a coalition of moderate Republicans and Democrats working together to propose that plan, but it would have to have have buy-in from both Hakeem Jeffries and whoever was leading the moderate Republicans if it wasn't someone in Republican leadership. And that's somewhat of a tall order. It's somewhat certain that Hakeem Jeffries would want some kind of assurances or even concessions out of Republicans to make that happen. We asked him today, earlier, what kind of concessions he would want. We were on the air with you when he did it, and he didn't necessarily answer that question. Very quickly, Diane, before I lose my oxygen here, I just want to update you as to where we are. So, as you see on your screen, there are 6 Republicans who have voted for someone other than Jim Jordan, and it's really staying typical to the list from the last vote on Wednesday. We haven't seen any new people flip to vote against Jim Jordan, but he also hasn't moved so far any of those who voted against him yesterday. Every single person, or Wednesday rather, every single person who voted against him Wednesday by our list so far is voting against him today. That includes Don Bacon, that includes Vern Buchanan, and Anthony Diaz-Pizito, and Mario Diaz-Balart, et cetera, et cetera. One small fact about Mario Diaz-Balart, because we have the time, he walked out of that meeting with Jim Jordan yesterday, where Jim Jordan was trying to move holdout votes from no's to yes. And I asked Congressman Diaz-Balart if Jim Jordan had said anything behind those closed doors that would have moved the needle with him, that would have moved him back to supporting Jim Jordan, moved him to supporting Jim Jordan in the first place. And the congressman just stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at me and he went, dude, come on. So there was nothing that Jim Jordan, according to Diaz-Balart, could have said behind those closed doors that would have moved the needle with him. And the reason why that matters is Republicans have such a small majority. If you have a few people like that that are just never Jim Jordan, it's a really tough legislative math problem for Jim Jordan.
And looking at that math problem right now, we're seeing 7 other votes, meaning 7 Republicans voting for someone other than Jim Jordan. Based on the count at roll call, Jordan could only afford to lose 5. Now he's up to 8 no votes. So again, we'll have to wait to see until this is all complete to know for sure. But it's looking like right now Jim Jordan is on track to lose this 3rd vote for House Speaker. Rachel, going into this, Jordan kind of set about on this pressure campaign, really trying to tighten the screws on his Republican holdouts and trying to really pressure them to change their minds publicly and privately. Does it seem like that has backfired?
Yeah, and another one now. So 9 not supporting Jordan. He is on track to lose this 3rd bid for Speaker. The pressure campaign has completely backfired on Congressman Jim Jordan. You have had allies of him, people that are supporting him, post the phone numbers of some of the holdouts on the internet. Congressman Don Bacon told me that his wife has been getting menacing calls. He actually shared one of the voicemails that she got with me, threatening not only her, but also her husband over not supporting a candidate for Speaker of the House. This is totally now not only not getting them any closer to supporting Jim Jordan, it's actually making them more resistant towards supporting Jim Jordan because they don't want to give in to any of this pressure. But it just says so much about where we are right now in the Republican Party, where Washington is, where you have a Speaker of the House that can be ousted for reaching across the aisle and working with Democrats. You can have someone else be nominated and drop out because they can't unify the conference. You could have Jim Jordan come forward, and then now, just because Republicans either don't like him as a candidate, don't believe that he's best representing the party, voting against him or not supporting him, they're receiving death threats. I mean, that is the level that we are at now, not only in the Republican Party, but also here in Washington. I will say that Congressman Jim Jordan has condemned those threats. He says that they are wrong. He's calling on them to stop, and he's pleading for the party to come together.
So, Rick, what are the options now? We're looking at 10 other votes, meaning 10 Republicans voting for someone other than Jim Jordan. So right now, all signs point to Jordan is on track to lose this 3rd vote. It's Friday. They're heading into a weekend. What now?
Yeah, and I'm checking this on the running tally here, and it does appear that there's one additional loss. Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, who voted for Jim Jordan in the first 2 votes, I think voted for Patrick McHenry this time around, the Speaker pro tem. So he's going backwards pretty clearly at this stage. So look, one option is you kind of grind it out. Jordan has been threatening that publicly. You stay in all weekend, you keep doing votes, and you kind of meet that definition of insanity of doing things all over again and thinking you're getting a different result. Jordan could drop out. He could say, I don't have it, and put the Republicans back to trying to hash this out behind closed doors, where a lot of folks on that floor right now wish they remained, so as to avoid the spectacle of the embarrassment. They could go back to that the last option. I guess you'd call it maybe option C or something like that, although we're running out of letters as we go into additional days, which would be giving additional powers to the Speaker Pro Tem. That's something that Jim Jordan wanted to do to buy himself more time. That, as Jay reported, collapsed. Or you kind of open things up, and the worst case scenario for them, working with the Democrats.
All right, Rachel Scott, Jay O'Brien, Rick Klein, thank you all. And here's a live look at
Good of Virginia. Jordan. Gooden of Texas. Jordan. Gosar. Jordan. Gottheimer. Jeffries. Granger. Scalise. Graves of Louisiana. Jordan. Graves of Missouri. Jordan. Green of Tennessee. Jordan. Green of Texas. Jeffries. Green of Georgia. Jordan. Griffith. Jordan. Grijalva. Jeffries. Grothman. Jordan. Guest. Jordan. Guthrie. Jordan. Hageman. Jordan. Harder of California. Jeffries. Harris. Jordan. Harshbarger. Jordan. Hayes. Jeffries. Hearn. Jordan. Higgins of Louisiana. Jordan. Higgins of New York. Jeffries. Hill. Jordan. Himes. Jeffries. Henson. Jordan. Horsford. Jeffries. Houchin. Jordan. Houlihan. Jeffries. Hoyer. Jeffries. Hoyle of Oregon. Jeffries. Hudson. Jordan. Huffman. Jeffries. Huizinga. Jordan. Hunt. Hunt. Isa. Jordan. Ivy. Ivy. Jeffries. Jackson of Illinois. Jeffries. Jackson of North Carolina. Jeffries. Jackson of Texas. Jordan. Jackson Lee.
The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Jacobs. Jeffries. James. Donalds. Jayapal. Jeffries. 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 Johnson of Georgia. Jeffries. Johnson of Louisiana. Jordan. Johnson of Ohio. Jordan. Johnson of South Dakota. Jordan. 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 Joyce of Ohio. Jordan. Joyce of Pennsylvania. Jordan. Cam Lagerdove. Jeffries. Captor. Jeffries. Kane of New Jersey. McCarthy. Keating. Jeffries. Kelly of Illinois. Jeffries. Kelly of Mississippi. Jordan. Kelly of Pennsylvania. Scalise. Khanna. Jeffries. Kiggins of Virginia. McHenry. Kildee. Jeffries. Kiley. Jordan. Kilmer. Jeffries. Kim of California. Jordan. Kim of New Jersey. Jeffries. Krishnamurthy. Jeffries. Custer. Jeffries. Kustoff. Jordan. LaHood. Jordan. LaLota. Zeldin. LaMalfa. Jordan. Lamborn. Jordan. Landsman. Jeffries. Langworthy. Jordan. Larson of Washington. Jeffries. Larson of Connecticut. Jeffries. Latta. Jordan. LaTurner. Jordan. Lawler. McHenry. Lee of California. Jeffries. Lee of Florida. Jordan.
Republicans this time around than he lost last time around. The last time we voted, remember, was Wednesday. They took a break on Thursday, all tried to get on the same page. That was unsuccessful, and now we're voting again today. And there are 2 Republicans who previously voted for Jim Jordan on the second ballot that now on this third ballot did not vote for him. Their names, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Tom Kean, who voted for Kevin McCarthy as well. And so Jim Jordan is losing more votes than he has picked up. He's picked up 0. Nobody's flipped from no to yes on Jim Jordan so far in this ballot, but 2 have flipped from essentially yes to no. So things not trending well for Jim Jordan. As you said, certainly on track, it appears, to lose this ballot. The question facing Jim Jordan when all is said and done, and if he does lose this ballot, is what do we do now? Do we go back for a second vote today or not?
Jay, one of the main reasons some Republican detractors said that they won't budge on Jordan, there are a few, but one of those being cited is a lack of legislative experience. McCarthy tried to push back on that in his nomination speech today. What do you make of the response? It doesn't seem to have done much, being we're looking at 19 other votes already, meaning Republicans, 19 of them voting for someone other than Jim Jordan.
Yeah, and just the fact, first and foremost, just the fact that Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, who had broad support in the Republican conference, save for those 8 Republicans who voted to oust him, nominated Jim Jordan, was huge. It was an attempt, it appeared, while watching that speech on the floor, of McCarthy to say to Republicans, I'm passing the torch to Jim Jordan. He even made a point to say he believes Jim Jordan is the best person to succeed him in the Speaker's chair. And then he said, to your point about that criticism of Jim Jordan, who has never written a bill in general and never been a co-sponsor on any legislation that's passed, he said that Republicans were using the wrong measuring stick. And he said it's a demonstration that Jim Jordan is selfless and a means of saying that Jim Jordan doesn't want the credit for passing legislation. But nonetheless, despite Kevin McCarthy giving his full-throated endorsement to Jim Jordan, a guy who's still, Kevin McCarthy, a guy who's still popular amongst House Republicans, it wasn't enough to move any needles right now, Diane, because again, nobody has moved from a no to a yes on Jim Jordan in this ballot.
So, Jay, what are the options now? This isn't exactly a small number of detractors. You're looking at 19 already voting for someone other than Jordan. You said you spoke to 22 of them last night. So what happens now as they head into the weekend?
So, and it's interesting because I spoke with a Republican source right before this vote began. And this Republican source is involved in a lot of these ongoing conversations with the Jordan team, but also with the holdouts. And one of the things this person told me is they don't know what the plan is. They're not getting an understanding from Jim Jordan's team. And this person isn't on Jim Jordan's immediate team, but they're not getting an understanding of even what the direction is and what the plan is. And there were a lot of questions about the efficacy, as Rick noted earlier in our coverage, of that press conference that Jim Jordan held so early in the morning, 8 a.m. this morning, to say that he wasn't dropping out of the race. And so there were a lot of Republicans, to your point, questioning really what happens next. Jim Jordan seemed to indicate this morning that he wanted to stay in the fight and he wanted to have multiple ballots. And so the question facing him today is, do we have multiple ballots today? Does he try to hash this out on the floor, kind of like what Kevin McCarthy did? Or does he take another break and reevaluate? And the reason why I mentioned taking a break and reevaluating is because you got to remember the tempo of Jim Jordan. You and I were both on the air for hours on end during the McCarthy speaker fight. And one of the reasons we were on the air for hours on end is because the votes were in rapid succession. McCarthy would lose a vote, and then they'd call another vote. And then he'd lose a vote, and then they'd call another vote. And they were on the floor for hours. Jim Jordan had a vote on Tuesday, lost. They took a break. Had a vote on Wednesday, lost. They took a break for all day Thursday to try to get behind closed doors and hash this out. That was unsuccessful. And now they're having their third vote today. So the tempo of votes that Jim Jordan is doing is nowhere near the tempo of votes we saw Kevin McCarthy do. And so the question facing Jim Jordan in the immediate, let alone what are you going to do about these 21 now holdout votes, but the immediate question he's facing is, do you want to up the tempo and hold another vote right after this one?
I'm sure there are many in Congress hoping that's not the case. 21 now other votes, Republicans voting for someone other than Jim Jordan, so it appears he has again lost this third bid for House Speaker. Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill. Jay, thank you. And here's a live...
Neal. Jeffries. Nagus. Jeffries. Nails. Jordan. Newhouse. Jordan. Nickel. Jeffries. Norcross. Jeffries. Norman. Jordan. None of Iowa. Jordan. Okay. Obernolte. Jordan. Ocasio-Cortez. Jeffries. Ogles. Jordan. Omar. Omar. Jeffries. Owens. Jordan. Pallone. Jeffries. Palmer. Jordan. Panetta. Jeffries. Pappas. Jeffries. Pascrell. Jeffries. Payne. Payne. Pelosi. Jeffries. Peltola. Jeffries. Pence. Jordan. Perez. Jeffries. Perry. Jordan. Peters. Jeffries. Pedersen. Jeffries. Pfluger. Jordan. Phillips. Jeffries. Pingree. Jeffries. Pocan. Jeffries. Porter. Jeffries. Posey. Jordan. Presley. Jeffries. Quigley. Jeffries. Ramirez. Jeffries. Raskin. Jeffries. Reschenthaler. Jordan. Rogers of Washington. Jordan. Rogers of Alabama. Jordan. Rogers of Kentucky. Jordan. Rose. Jordan. Rosendale. Jordan. Ross. Jeffries. Rouser. Jordan. Roy. Jordan. Ruiz. Jeffries. Rupersberger. Jeffries. Rutherford. Scalise. Ryan. Jeffries. Salazar. Jordan. Salinas. Jeffries. Sanchez. Jeffries. Santos. Jordan. Sarbanes. Jeffries. Scalise. Jordan. Scanlon. Jeffries. Schakowsky. Jeffries. Schiff. Jeffries. Schneider. Jeffries. Skolton. Jeffries. Schreier. Jeffries. Schweikert. Jordan. Austin Scott. Jordan. David Scott. Jeffries. Scott of Virginia. Jeffries. Self. Jordan. Sessions. Jordan. Sewell. Jeffries. Sherman. Jeffries. Sherrill. Jeffries. Simpson. Scalise. Slotkin. Jeffries. Smith of Missouri. Jordan. Smith of Nebraska. Jordan. Smith of New Jersey. Jordan. Smith of Washington. Jeffries. Smucker. Jordan. Sorensen. Jeffries. Soto. Jeffries. Spanberger. Jeffries. Sparts. Jordan. Stansbury. Jeffries. Stanton. Jeffries. Stauber. Westerman. Steele. Jordan. Stefanik. Jordan. Style. Jordan. Stubbe. Jordan. Stevens. Jeffries. Strickland. Jeffries. Strong. Jordan. Swalwell. Jeffries. Sykes. Jeffries. Takano. Jeffries. Tenney. Jordan. Tanadar. Jeffries. Thompson of California. Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi. Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania. Jordan. Tiffany. Jordan. Timmons. Jordan. Titus. Jeffries. Talib. Jeffries. Takuda. Jeffries. Tonko. Jeffries. Torres of California. Jeffries. Torres of New York. Jeffries. Trahan. Jeffries. Trone. Jeffries. Turner. Jordan. Underwood. Jeffries. Valadeo. Jordan. Van Drew.
The Honorable Jim Jordan.
Jordan. Van Dyne. Jordan. Van Orden. Van Orden. Vargas. Jeffries. Vasquez. Jeffries. VC. Jeffries. Velasquez. Jeffries. Wagner. Jordan. Wahlberg. Jordan. Waltz. Jordan. Wasserman Schultz. Jeffries. Waters. Jeffries. Watson Coleman. Jeffries. Weber of Texas. Jordan. Webster of Florida. Jordan. Winstrup. Jordan. Westerman. Jordan. Wexton. Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia. Jeffries. Williams of New York. Jordan. Williams of Texas. Jordan. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina. Jordan. Whitman. Jordan. Womack. Scalise. Yakum. Jordan. Zinke. Jordan.
All right, so the first one you're going to have is Mr. Lost. And then you're going to have Fox. And then you have Vicente Gonzalez. And then Mr. Payne's in here.
What about Hunt?
And Hunt.
The reading clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first roll call.
Bast. Jordan. Fox. Jordan. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Hunt. Hunt.
This one's Payne.
Payne. Payne. Van Orden. Van Orden.
If there are any members who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time.
leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances is what keep us, America, safe. If we walk away from Ukraine, we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it.
Meanwhile, Israel's military says it hit more than 100 Hamas and Hezbollah targets overnight. We'll have much more on Israel's war with Hamas in just a moment. But we begin with that failed third House vote for Speaker. Congressman Jim Jordan lost that third bid again, faring even worse than in previous rounds, losing the support of 25 Republicans this time around. Jordan had announced that he would not drop out of the race earlier this morning, but what happens next is anyone's guess. ABC's Jay O'Brien and contributing political correspondent Rachel Bade join me now on Capitol Hill for more. Jay, what do you think? This idea that Jordan is going to hang in there till the very end, what does that mean after 25 Republicans now voted against him?
Yeah, and so he had this press conference at 8 a.m., Diane. You and I were on the air together for it. And the press conference's theme was, I'm not going anywhere. He said he was in the fight, that they were going to have this third vote today, which at that point was a few hours from that press conference, and that he wasn't going to back down. You're seeing images of him about to address those microphones earlier in the morning on your screen there. But here's the thing. That was before he lost more votes in this round than he lost the last time. The last time they voted for Speaker was on Wednesday. Republicans took a break yesterday. On Wednesday, 22 Republicans voted against Jim Jordan. Today, to your point, 25 Republicans voted against Jim Jordan. 3 who were for Jim Jordan on Wednesday were not for him today. And so Jim Jordan is going in the opposite direction, as our political director, Rick Klein, is saying. And so he's losing momentum at this hour. And so the question really facing Jim Jordan is, what does he do next? Does he try to force another vote, as some Jordan allies had speculated he might do this morning, meaning after he loses this vote, jump right into a second vote? That was Kevin McCarthy's strategy at times in January. Does he take another break, as he had done after the 2 previous votes, and try to get all the Republicans in a room like he did before and work out their differences? That strategy has not proven successful up till this hour. What does he do next? Honestly, we don't know the answer to that question.
And Rachel, what are the other options right now?
Well, I mean, he can keep fighting. He can withdraw. He can try to take time and muscle the votes. But all these options, I mean, are obviously not looking good for Jim Jordan. I will say, even though he lost 25 defections on this vote, as Jay just mentioned, that's actually fewer than a lot of Jordan critics were predicting. I was hearing from people behind the scenes that they thought as many as 10 new flips would come out against him. There were only 3, not 10. So I actually would be rather surprised if he chose to drop out right now, given that it's not as bad, perhaps, as what some people were thinking. It's still not great, of course. I do think it's important to note one person who flipped his vote, Marcus Molinaro, who's a Republican from New York. That flip against Jordan is significant because Jordan actually spent the past couple of days meeting with a lot of New York Republicans, thinking he could actually hold the line and keep them in his corner. He actually offered them a huge concession, offering to raise the state and local tax deduction. This is a very expensive tax break, costs taxpayers a lot of money, but obviously very important to Republicans from these high-cost states, such as New York Republicans. Even with that offer, Molinaro refused to sort of accept it and came out against him. So again, this is not looking good for Jordan, and we'll just have to see. Does he call another vote today? Does he wait? But it's obviously moving in the wrong direction for him.
Jay, we heard the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries come out this morning calling for a bipartisan path forward, calling on Republicans to join him and other Democrats in a bipartisan path forward. How realistic is that looking at this point, and what even is that path forward if it were to happen?
First and foremost, Diane, if I may, we do have a little bit of breaking news to the question of what's Jim Jordan going to do next. So sources are telling me, our Rachel Scott, our senior congressional correspondent, and Lauren Peller, who produces here in the House of Representatives for us, that Republicans look like they're going to go into a conference meeting, which is a meeting of all the House Republicans at 1 o'clock, less than an hour from now. That's a closed-door meeting. Again, it's the kind of meeting they've been having over the last few days. Frankly, it's the kind of meeting they've been having over the last dozens of days, dozen-plus days since Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker. So one thing about those conference meetings is we have yet to see Republicans emerge from a conference meeting over the multiple they've had more unified than when they walked in those doors. In fact, there have been meetings where they've walked in semi-unified and left even more divided than they were before. So it remains to be seen what happens here at 1 o'clock. But that seems to be the next plan for Jim Jordan. So no vote scheduled right now. Instead, Republicans are going to huddle behind closed doors at 1 o'clock again. To your question about bipartisanship, Hakeem Jeffries certainly held the door open for the possibility that he would partner with moderate Republicans on a temporary House Speaker, or potentially even to install a bipartisan elected speaker who might be a moderate Republican. But we have yet to hear enough moderate Republicans really express interest in that offer from Hakeem Jeffries, and certainly it might come with conditions from Jeffries.
429.
Let's listen in. Let's listen in there to temporary Speaker Pat McHenry.
Received 194. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 210. The Honorable Patrick McHenry of the state of North Carolina has received 6. All right, the House will come to order. The House will come to order. The Honorable Byron Donalds of the state of Florida has received 2. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 4. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 8. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 2. The Honorable Bruce Westerman of the state of Arkansas has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
There you have it. Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry declaring it official that this third round of voting for House Speaker has failed. Again, Jay O'Brien's on Capitol Hill, as is our correspondent Rachel Bade. Jay, going through the breakdown here, it sounds like Scalise, it doesn't sound like it is. Scalise, other than Jim Jordan, is the Republican here who got the most votes. He was the initial nominee. Could we see his name thrown back in the ring?
It's funny, I asked that question yesterday of a couple of Scalise allies, and they said they really couldn't see that happening unless he were drafted by the House Republican Conference, meaning that it came from the conference saying, Steve Scalise, we're all going to get back behind you. But the reality here, as Rachel knows very well, is that Steve Scalise's bid for Speaker didn't work out either. There were opponents of Steve Scalise who said they weren't going to budge. There was some behind-the-scenes movement from former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who's had a long-standing feud with Steve Scalise, and that it was one of the elements that deprived Steve Scalise of the Speaker's gavel. So he's got some impediments, too, just like Jim Jordan encountered. The other thing, too, Diane, and Rachel knows this just as well, is that one of the things we've heard from, we've asked Republicans this question of who's next? Who's waiting in the wings? Who wants to take the baton from Jim Jordan if Jim Jordan bails out? And one of the things Republicans consistently tell me is that they've got some names, there are some people who are really eyeing it, but nobody wants to step to Jim Jordan right now, because there is a contingent of hardline conservatives who say they are going to back Jim Jordan at every turn. So if there are Republicans who come out right now and try to step to Jim Jordan as he looks vulnerable in this moment, those hardline conservatives could potentially turn against them. And as we know, it's why we're here in the first place. If you have a small contingent of House Republicans opposed to anything, more than 4 typically, then that throws everything into chaos, because of that small margin that House Republicans have in control of that chamber.
So, Rachel, if it's like a game of hot potato, no one seems to want to hold the Speaker potato, at least no one with enough support to do it. So if these other names being thrown out there, you know, Scalise, McCarthy again, Byron Donalds, Tom Emmer, if they are not viable, then could Republicans in this meeting potentially circle back to, what is it, Plan C now, of giving the temporary Speaker, Patrick McHenry, more power in the meantime?
Diane, that idea seems dead for now, but I mean, obviously we have a government funding deadline coming up in just a few weeks, so I don't think it's out completely. But just to keep with your sort of analogies, I heard this really great one a couple days ago from a Democrat, that House Republicans are basically like a bucket of crabs that are basically waiting for the boiling water. You don't need a lid on them, because every time a crab starts to climb up the side, another crab grabs it down and pulls it down, so none of them can get out. It's kind of like that with Republicans. Anytime a leader starts to go up, get closer to the gavel, someone else pulls them down, because they have their own ambitions of ruling. And right now we are hearing that there's talk behind the scenes about other Republicans, as Jay mentioned here. Jody Arrington, he's the House Budget Committee chairman. His name has been floated out there by fellow Texans. He's from Texas himself. Tom Emmer, the House Majority Whip, who knows a lot of the members both on the conservatives and the moderate side. He's obviously seen as a potential person who could jump in. And I just want to go back to one more thing Jay was talking about. Republicans are going to be meeting in another closed-door conference. They've been calling this basically the endless Festivus, to basically air these grievances, kind of like you saw in a Seinfeld episode, where they just come out and they sort of take shots at each other. It's probably not going to be very productive. But one thing we heard in the previous House Republican meeting from earlier this week, there were lawmakers who stood up and pressed Jim Jordan and reminded him of a promise he actually made when he ran for this position. He said, if I can't get 217 votes, I will withdraw. Steve Scalise made the same promise, and when he saw that he couldn't get there, he withdrew within 48 hours. Well, Jim Jordan is actually not doing that right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if you hear Republicans start to really press him on that. Look, you made this deal, you're not there. How long are you going to hold us hostage before another Republican can take a shot at trying to win the gavel themselves? And he's going to have to answer for that, because he did make a commitment, and he's not sticking to that right now.
Rachel, could any of those other names garner enough support, or Jay, you can answer this too, would any of these other names garner enough support if Jordan throws his support behind them?
I defer to my friend Rachel Bade first.
Thanks, Jay. Way to put
He's
me
a
on the spot.
gentleman, Rachel. He's a gentleman.
Yeah, so I would say that if Jim Jordan if any other candidate is going to be viable, they're going to have to get the support of these hardcore Jordan supporters. And the way to do that is that Jim Jordan himself is going to have to be out there supporting whoever this next person might be, and not just giving lip service to this, but really actively whipping for that person and helping that person. And this was a problem that Steve Scalise encountered. Jim Jordan offered privately to give the nomination for Scalise when he actually won the nomination in the closed-door conference meeting. He offered to nominate him on the floor in the House and project his support publicly, but privately, he sent a very different message to his allies. He told Steve Scalise, you get one shot. If you don't get this on the first vote, you will nominate me. Steve Scalise refused to take that deal with him, but that was the problem. Jordan was not willing to give the full might of his bully pulpit and put it behind whoever that nominee is. But he definitely will need to do that in order to get these folks who say they are only going to vote for Jordan, they are going to oppose anybody else. He's going to need to do that and really work for that person in order for us to see another speaker.
Jay, this whole thing started with a group of hardline Republicans being angry about then Speaker McCarthy reaching compromise with Democrats to fund the government. Could this backfire on them if this ends with Republicans finding compromise with Democrats to elect the next House Speaker?
What a great question. And it's funny because Matt Gaetz, who really led that charge to oust Kevin McCarthy, I was in a gaggle of reporters yesterday surrounding Gaetz when Gaetz got that exact question. Me and a few other people shouted it at him. And he essentially said he doesn't regret moving to oust Kevin McCarthy. He, essentially, the characterization of his remarks were he had a real big problem with Kevin McCarthy, and he wanted Kevin McCarthy gone. And despite the fact that Gaetz never said it was personal with McCarthy, he said he wanted him gone yesterday. And the point being, Matt Gaetz says he doesn't regret this, despite the fact that this has paralyzed the House of Representatives, put us closer to the possibility of a government shutdown because you can't bring any spending bills to the floor until there is a speaker, created the stronger likelihood that there would be another continuing resolution, a stopgap funding measure to keep the government open, something Gaetz strongly opposed and was part of his reasoning for ousting Kevin McCarthy in the first place, and also potentially, as you just noted, pushed moderate Republicans closer to moderate Democrats. Gaetz, nonetheless, says that Kevin McCarthy and the Speaker's gavel, getting him out of that chair, getting him out of the Speaker's chair, taking the Speaker gavel out of his hand, was worth all of that.
All right. Well, we will be following this one closely. Rachel Bay, Jay O'Brien, thank you both again. For anyone just joining us, a third vote for House Speaker just failed on the House floor. Anybody's guess what happens next. Republicans will be meeting behind closed doors. We, of course, will bring you any more information as we get it, and we'll have more from Israel right after the break.
Whenever news...